The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elena Hartwell's corner office, casting geometric patterns across her mahogany desk. At 38, she had built Hartwell Global Industries from a small consulting firm into a multi-billion-dollar empire spanning technology, real estate, and sustainable energy. Yet this morning, the view of the city skyline brought little peace. Elena held a printed email in her hands, the third anonymous message in 2 weeks. Secrets have a way of surfacing. Your empire isn't as secure as you think. No demands, no specifics, just psychological warfare designed to unsettle her. She placed it calmly in a locked drawer with the others, her face betraying nothing. "Mom, Becca's here." 8-year-old Natalie's voice echoed through the executive suite. Elena's best friend and chief operating officer, Rebecca Morrison, appeared moments later, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her expression concerned. "Another one?" Becca asked, noting Elena's posture. "Anonymous threats are nothing new at this level," Elena replied, though both women knew this felt different. "How are the quarterly projections?" They spent an hour reviewing financials before Elena had to prepare for the evening's charity gala, an event she'd organized to fund scholarships for underprivileged girls pursuing business degrees. It was a cause deeply personal to her, rooted in her own struggle to afford college while working 3 jobs. The ballroom glittered that evening with crystal chandeliers and the who's who of the business world. Elena moved gracefully through conversations, her emerald gown elegant but not ostentatious. Marcus, her husband of 12 years, stood beside her, playing his role despite the distance that had grown between them since his affair 3 years ago. Then Elena saw her. Sienna Cross, stunning in red silk, speaking intimately with board member David Chen near the bar. Sienna's presence wasn't illegal. She ran a marketing consultancy that occasionally contracted with various firms, but the audacity of her attendance was unmistakable. Their eyes met across the room. Sienna smiled, raised her champagne glass in a mock toast, and mouthed words Elena could read perfectly. "You can't stop us." Elena's hand tightened imperceptibly around her own glass before relaxing. She returned the smile with one of perfect serenity, then turned to continue her conversation about scholarship criteria with the university dean. But her mind was already working, cataloguing observations. Sienna's familiarity with David, their body language, the subtle glances. Becca appeared at her elbow. "Did you see?" "I saw," Elena murmured. "Tomorrow morning, I want a full audit of all consulting contracts from the past 18 months. Quietly." "You think she's—" "I think someone is trying very hard to make me react emotionally," Elena said softly, her composure absolute. "That alone tells me everything I need to know about how to respond." Elena stood in her home office at 3 in the morning, unable to sleep. The walls displayed her journey, a framed photo of her 22-year-old self accepting her college diploma, the first in her family. Beside it, the business license for her initial consulting firm, started with $7,000 and a laptop purchased on credit. She had grown up in a neighborhood where ambition was viewed with suspicion, where her mother cleaned houses to pay rent. Elena remembered carrying textbooks wrapped in grocery bags, studying by streetlight when the electricity was shut off. Those memories fueled her, not with bitterness, but with unshakable determination. Marcus had been different then, hungry, creative, collaborative. They'd built the company together, though Elena's strategic vision had truly propelled their growth. When Natalie was born, their partnership had felt complete. Until 2 years later, when Elena discovered text messages on Marcus's phone that shattered her carefully constructed world. Sienna had been a marketing consultant they'd hired for a product launch. Young, ambitious, magnetic. The affair lasted 4 months before Elena confronted them both. Marcus had begged for forgiveness, genuinely remorseful. Sienna had simply smiled and said, "He came to me willingly." Elena had made a calculated decision then. Divorce would weaken the company during a critical expansion phase and devastate Natalie. Instead, she'd negotiated, counseling for Marcus, complete transparency, and Sienna's immediate contract termination with a generous severance that included a non-disclosure agreement. What Elena hadn't known was that Sienna had been quietly copying proprietary information, building relationships with key board members, and nurturing a grudge that matured into something far more dangerous than a simple affair. The forensic audit Becca initiated revealed troubling patterns. David Chen, head of their Asian markets division, had approved numerous contracts with Shell consulting companies over 18 months. The payments weren't large enough to trigger automatic reviews, 50,000 here, 75,000 there, but collectively, they totaled nearly $2 million. These companies barely exist, James Whitmore, their legal counsel, explained during an emergency meeting in Elena's office. Website registrations within the past 2 years, minimal digital footprint, and all payments routed through offshore accounts. Becca pulled up a social media photo on her tablet. David and Sienna at a business conference in Singapore. 6 months ago. Another photo appeared. A restaurant in Tokyo. 4 months ago. Elena studied the images with detached analysis. Sienna's hand on David's arm, their body language suggesting intimacy beyond professional collaboration. They're not just working together, she observed quietly. There's more, James continued, his expression grave. I found draft proposals in David's archived emails, plans to launch a competing firm using modified versions of our sustainable energy algorithms. The technical specifications are too similar to be coincidental. Corporate espionage. Embezzlement. Conspiracy. The words hung in the air like accusations. Marcus, who'd been listening silently, finally spoke. This is my fault. I brought her into our lives. Elena looked at her husband with something close to compassion. No, Marcus. Your mistake was 3 years ago. This is Sienna's choice, and David's greed. We respond with strategy, not self-recrimination. That night, Elena sat with Natalie during bedtime stories. Her daughter, perceptive beyond her years, asked, Mommy, why do people try to take things that aren't theirs? Elena smoothed Natalie's hair thoughtfully. Sometimes people mistake taking for earning. But anything truly worth having, respect, success, love, can only be built, never stolen. Like you built your company. Exactly like that, sweetheart. As Natalie drifted to sleep, Elena made her decision. This wouldn't be about revenge or emotional satisfaction. It would be about justice, protection, and teaching a lesson about the consequences of underestimating someone's strength. The 72 hours before the board meeting moved with a strange duality of time, simultaneously crawling and racing. Elena maintained her normal schedule with meticulous precision. Morning strategy sessions, afternoon client meetings, evening dinner with Natalie. To any observer, she appeared completely unruffled. But in the quiet spaces between public appearances, her team worked with surgical efficiency. James compiled a comprehensive legal brief documenting every fraudulent transaction, every forged email, every breach of fiduciary duty. Becca prepared financial projections demonstrating Elena's strategic vision for the next 5 years, innovation roadmaps that would silence any claims of stagnation. The 2 board members who'd expressed genuine concerns met with Elena separately. Thomas Brennan, a retired tech executive, listened as Elena outlined plans for artificial intelligence integration in their sustainable energy division. Why didn't you present this at the last quarterly? He asked. Because development wasn't complete, Elena replied honestly. I don't announce intentions, I deliver results. The prototype launches in 6 weeks. Margaret Foster, who'd built her fortune in manufacturing, nodded approvingly when Elena showed her the research partnerships with 3 universities. David said you were resisting change. David was positioning himself as the solution to a problem he invented, Elena said without malice. Judge my leadership by outcomes, not whispers. Both board members left those meetings considerably less convinced by David's narrative. On the evening before the board meeting, Elena sat in Natalie's room, watching her daughter arrange her stuffed animals in elaborate scenarios. A threadbare elephant, Elena's own childhood toy, mended dozens of times, held a position of honor. Mommy, why do you fix Mr. Trunk instead of buying a new one? Natalie asked, as if reading Elena's thoughts. Elena picked up the elephant, running her thumb over the stitched repairs. Because some things become more valuable because of what they've survived, not despite it. These patches? Each one represents a time someone cared enough to keep something worth keeping. Natalie considered this seriously. Like when you fix the company after Daddy made it sad. Children's perceptions could be devastatingly accurate. Yes, exactly like that. Are you fixing something now? Elena pulled her daughter close. I'm protecting something. There's a difference. Fixing means something is broken. Protection means recognizing value before someone can damage it. After Natalie fell asleep, Elena found Marcus in his study, staring at old photos of their early company days. I never apologized properly, he said without preamble. Not for the affair itself, I've said sorry 1,000 times for that. But for not seeing how it would keep hurting us. For bringing someone into our lives who studied us, learned our weaknesses, and waited for her opportunity. Elena sat beside him, not touching, but present. Sienna's choices are her own. Your mistake was human. Her calculation is something else entirely. How are you so calm? Marcus asked, genuine wonder in his voice. Tomorrow they're attempting a corporate coup, and you're serene. Because I've already won, Elena said simply. Not through luck or hope, but through preparation. When I was 22 and the electricity company shut off our power for the 3rd time, I studied by streetlight and promised myself something. I would never again be unprepared for challenges I could anticipate. Sienna thinks she's playing chess while I'm playing checkers. She doesn't realize I've been playing 3-dimensional chess since before she graduated college. Marcus looked at his wife with renewed recognition of the woman he'd married. What happens tomorrow? Tomorrow, people learn an important lesson about the difference between authority earned and power stolen. Elena stood, her posture relaxed but her eyes bright with purpose. And tomorrow, you decide whether you're truly committed to rebuilding what we had, or whether you're just afraid of losing what I built. The challenge hung in the air, not cruel, but honest. Marcus nodded slowly, accepting the accountability. That night, Elena slept deeply for the first time in weeks. She'd done everything possible to prepare. The outcome was certain not because of arrogance, but because of thoroughness. She'd learned long ago that confidence came not from believing you were unbeatable, but from ensuring you were unpredictable to those who'd studied only your surface. At dawn, Elena dressed in a navy suit, powerful but not aggressive, authoritative but approachable. She braided Natalie's hair and made her chocolate chip pancakes, their tradition for important days. You're going to win today, Natalie announced matter-of-factly. What makes you so sure? Because you always do your homework, and people who cheat never study hard enough to beat people who really know stuff. Elena kissed her daughter's forehead, marveling at the wisdom that emerged from innocence. Remember that, always. The boardroom occupied the entire 42nd floor, with panoramic windows framing the city Elena had conquered through determination rather than birthright. 12 board members sat around the glass conference table, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned to conspiratorial. David and Sienna entered together, their body language radiating premature victory. Sienna had dressed for triumph, a sharp white suit that contrasted deliberately with Elena's navy. David carried a leather portfolio thick with documents. Elena sat at the head of the table, Becca to her right, James to her left. She'd insisted Marcus attend as well, positioned where he could observe but not interfere. Thank you all for attending this emergency session, Elena began, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd never needed to raise it. I understand some of you have concerns about the company's direction. Before we address those, I'd like to present our strategic roadmap for the next 5 years. Becca activated the presentation. For 20 minutes, Elena outlined innovations that would position Hartwell Global as the industry leader in sustainable technology integration. The research was thorough, the projections conservative, the partnerships already secured. Several board members leaned forward with genuine interest. David interrupted. These plans are ambitious, but they avoid addressing the fundamental issue, leadership that's become insular and risk-averse. I've prepared an alternative proposal that several board members have already reviewed. I'm aware, Elena said pleasantly. Thomas and Margaret shared your concerns with me, which prompted deeper conversations about vision versus execution. Would you like to present your proposal now? David blinked, surprised by her cooperation. Yes. He distributed bound copies of his plan, which called for Elena to transition to chairwoman emeritus while he assumed CEO responsibilities. Sienna would join as chief strategy officer, bringing fresh perspective to a stagnating organization. As he spoke, Elena noticed the three compromised board members, Harrison, Linda, and James McAllister, nodding along with rehearsed timing. The others looked less convinced, especially after seeing Elena's actual strategic plans. When David finished, Sienna added her rehearsed speech. Change is difficult, but necessary. Elena built something remarkable, but maintaining greatness requires knowing when to pass the torch to those who can carry it forward. Elena let silence settle before responding. David, Sienna, your presentation raises important questions about leadership, integrity, and what this board values. She looked at James Whitmore. Perhaps now is the time to address those questions comprehensively. James opened his own portfolio. Over the past 3 weeks, at Mrs. Hartwell's request, we've conducted a forensic audit of all departmental expenditures. The results are illuminating. He distributed documents methodically. Bank statements showing $2 million routed through shell companies controlled by Sienna and David. Emails between them discussing corporate espionage. Screenshots of proprietary algorithms stored on Sienna's personal servers. Recorded conversations with competitors offering Hartwell's trade secrets. The color drained from David's face. Sienna's composure cracked, her eyes darting between board members, searching for allies who were suddenly studying the documents with horrified fascination. These are fabrications, David stammered. This is retaliation because I dared to question. The bank records are from institutions you chose, Elena interrupted gently. The emails are from your company server, authenticated by our IT department and verified by independent forensic specialists. The recordings include your voice discussing specific proprietary information that only someone with access to our secure systems could possess. She turned to the 3 compromised board members. Harrison, Linda, James. You'll also find documentation of consulting contracts offered to you by David in exchange for supporting this restructuring. The amounts aren't large enough to constitute bribery, so I'm offering you a choice. Resign quietly with recommendations intact, or we disclose these conflicts publicly and let shareholders decide your fate. The 3 looked at each other, then at David, realizing they'd been positioned as accomplices rather than allies. Harrison spoke first. I'll tender my resignation effective immediately. The other 2 followed within seconds. Sienna finally found her voice, though it shook with fury rather than confidence. You can't do this. We have rights, legal recourse. You have the right to face criminal charges for corporate espionage, embezzlement, and conspiracy, James said calmly. Federal prosecutors have copies of everything here. They're remarkably interested in companies that steal technology funded partially by government research grants. Elena stood, walking slowly around the table until she stood directly before Sienna. Her expression held no anger, no triumph, only the serene certainty of someone who'd never doubted the outcome. You told me I couldn't stop you, Elena said quietly. But you misunderstood the situation entirely. I didn't need to stop you. I simply needed to let you continue until you stopped yourselves. Every theft, every forgery, every whispered conspiracy. You built your own cage while believing you were constructing my prison. She smiled then, the same smile she'd given at the charity gala, but now its meaning was perfectly clear. Not mockery, but the peaceful satisfaction of justice served. Security will escort you both from the building. Your personal effects will be shipped. All access privileges are terminated. Legal proceedings will begin Monday. Elena returned to her seat. This meeting is adjourned. As security led David and Sienna away, her confident red dress from the gala replaced by white suit now wrinkled with defeat, Elena remained seated, accepting quiet congratulations from the remaining board members. Marcus approached last, speaking softly so only she could hear. I spent 3 years convinced I'd broken us beyond repair. Today I realized, you didn't just survive what I did to our marriage. You became stronger precisely because you chose to rise above it. Elena looked at her husband, seeing genuine humility for perhaps the first time. Strength isn't about never falling, Marcus. It's about learning to stand on ground so solid that when others push, they're the ones who stumble. That evening, Elena kept her promise to take Natalie to the park. As her daughter climbed and played, Becca sat beside Elena on a bench. You never seemed worried, Becca observed. Not once. I was terrified, Elena admitted. But fear doesn't require advertising. I taught myself long ago that the difference between confidence and arrogance is preparation. Confident people do their homework. Arrogant people assume they don't need to. What happens now? Elena watched Natalie helping a younger child reach the monkey bars, teaching rather than competing. Now we build. We innovate. We mentor young women who need to see that power doesn't require cruelty, that success doesn't demand sacrificing integrity, and that the strongest response to intimidation is often the quietest one. She stood, brushing off her skirt. And we remember that empires aren't really built from money or mergers. They're built from the choices we make when we're challenged, whether we respond with wisdom or react with emotion, whether we protect what matters or just protect ourselves. As they walked toward Natalie, Elena felt the weight of the past weeks lift. Not because she'd won, victory was never the point, but because she'd protected what she'd built without compromising who she was. And that, she knew, was the only triumph that truly mattered. Life lesson: the most powerful response to those who try to intimidate you isn't anger or revenge. It's the calm certainty that comes from knowing your foundation is too strong to shake.